Let's talk to Robby Soave, senior editor at Reason and the host of The Rising on Hill TV, which everyone should be watching. Robby, thank you so much for joining us. So it seems to me that in Zoran Mamdani's socialist utopia world, you would show more signs of identification if you wanted to shovel snow for your neighbour than if you wanted to take part in a federal election. Is that the vibe I'm getting here?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. That's what Zoran said. That's what the city requires. Going to become an emergency snow shoveler. You have to prevent multiple forms of identification. But of course, Democrats like Zoran are fighting tooth and nail the SAVE Act, which would require voters in our elections to have some kind of proof that they are a citizen. It's not difficult to obtain that proof, by the way. It's very, very, very easy. It's cheap. It can be done. Now, look, I'm a libertarian. I also find it annoying having to procure government forms every now and then, but for our elections, I'd say that's okay. And 80% of my fellow citizens agree with me, including 70 or 80% of virtually every identity group that Democrats claim opposes this or would be harmed by this because Democrats think they're too stupid to figure out how they can fill out forms. It's not the case. Everyone supports it. So it's pretty uncontroversial, and yet they fight it.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to get into there. So one, you say the Democrats, they're saying, oh, it's this awful thing that people need to go through to get to voter ID. It's so hard the second someone gets married that they should fight the realms of government to prove that they're still the person they are. Or elderly people would just be completely confused by the whole process, which to me isn't an argument to restrict voter ID. It's a reason to reform government laws. Like, it shouldn't take someone solving 3 riddles and wrestling a minotaur in a labyrinth somewhere to be able to get government ID. Like, just reform the laws that are already there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, dealing with the IRS is annoying and stressful and irritating. That doesn't mean I don't have to pay taxes. I wish it were the case. I wish my annoyance at our tax authorities meant I didn't have to do it that way. But it doesn't. Voting actually is not compulsory. So if you find the entire process so baffling and so incomprehensible, you can opt not to vote. I mean, that's not a popular expression. People, take the right very seriously, which is good, and they should. But you can get a passport quite easily. You can get any form of identification. I think it takes about $10 to get the form of identification they're going to be requiring under this law, the SAVE Act. And Democrats in every other context are the party in the U.S. of vigorously following rules prescribed by government and prescribed by bureaucrats. They love paperwork. They love making sure you have a permit for your little lemonade stand. Oh no, we can't, do that without a permit, that kind of thing. The snow shoveling shows that. It's a textbook example of that. So why they would be so worked up in the voter identification case really makes no sense. Except they think wrongly, in my view, honestly, that it will cost them votes, but that's not even clear that that's the case in the sort of Trump voting constituency. Works that way.
Yeah, it's one of the, I had some poll statistics earlier on in my editorial showing, as you say, just how popular voter ID laws are, even with Democrats. And I know it's like this, I hear it from Scott Jennings, maybe he came up with it, maybe it predates him, but the idea of the 80-20 issues, right? As a party, you want to be in issues where you're on the same side as 80% of the population. And if you keep finding yourself on the side of the 20% on issues such as voter ID, that's going to cost you in the long run. It just seems like when even a majority of Democrat voters are on the side of voter ID reforms, they are essentially arguing on behalf of no one. It's just such it's a niche position to take on a policy that a whole lot of people care about. Where is the win in the end of it?
Well, they're arguing on behalf of progressive elites, which hold a lot of sway among the Democratic Party. No, it's not arguing on behalf of any specific mass of people. It's just what's important to them ideologically, and it does follow from an idea they used to have that Democrats had a lot of low propensity voters in their coalition, and that if you inconvenience people even a little, you would be disproportionately turning away people who would vote for Democrats. Now, that thinking is, I would argue, outdated, because in the Trump era, Trump actually benefits from a lot of low propensity voters. And the people who are worked up and furious about politics and are going to go to the ballot box no matter what are disproportionately voting at this point for Democrats and against Trump. Polls showed us in the last election that, Trump won the popular vote. If everyone in America had been forced to vote, he would have won it by even more. So that would be, I guess, a criticism here of Republicans being so obsessed with this. I think their thinking's outdated too. They're like, oh, we'll stop the people who vote Democrats from voting. I don't see much evidence that's the case. It should just be we only want people who we know are citizens of the country to vote, and that's not controversial. And we don't care who it helps or who it hurts. It probably doesn't make much difference on the margins anyway. That's how it should be.
I want to move on to another strange appeal to low propensity voters. This one coming from Gavin Newsom. So Gavin Newsom, I think, is the most obvious, secret in the world that he's going to be running in the next election campaign. And he's got his new memoir coming out. Just so happens to be in time for some sort of campaign to get off the ground, get his name out there, get some buzz going. He's at a crowd in Atlanta, and he's talking about his memoir, and he wants to relate to people in the room. Now, it's been reported that this was a majority black crowd. You were pointing out on the Rising that it's actually not a majority black crowd, it's a majority white crowd. But I still think, Atlanta, a city where the black crowd is such a big part of the vote, it still contextualizes the comments in such a way. But here's what he told the voters.
I'm like you. I'm no better than you. I'm a 960 SAT guy. and I'm not trying to offend anyone, trying to act all there if you got 940. But literally a 960 SAT guy. I cannot, you've never seen me read a speech because I cannot read a speech. Maybe the wrong business to be in.
There's two things I want to get into about this. The first being Gavin Newsom. The biggest issue for him becoming the Democrat candidate, to me, is the fact that he suffers from what I call rich Democrat face. Like, there's no one I've ever seen that has a face that says more, I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I've been voting Democrat since the day I was born, and I'm going to continue that way. So he does need to overcome that in some respects if he's going to go with the regular crowd. Like, Bill Clinton had the same affliction, but he was very popular with average voters because he could empathize with them. I don't see it with Gavin Newsom. But the second thing is, and in a way, it harks back to this is how the Democrat elite see the average voter, in the idea that I'm like you because I too have terrible SAT scores and struggle to read, is in a sense saying that I think anyone below a certain salary level is just a, knuckle-dragging caveman. Like, we'll start off with that one. Why would he go for that?
In fairness to him, there was an idea introduced on social media that he was primarily talking to black people, and there's a long history of white liberal elite Democrats talking down to black people, thinking somehow that would make them more amenable to them. And giving him a pass on that here because it was a mixed audience. It wasn't a specific audience of one race or the other.
Can I just jump in there? Sorry to interrupt. I just want to jump in there because, yes, Sean Hannity had this big editorial talking about how he's talking to black voters. I did think it was quite kind of interesting. We showed it on screen before, which is why I'm jumping in, which is Gavin Newsom reacting to Sean Hannity in quite a profanity-laden way, saying, you didn't call out President Trump when he posted the ape video, and you're calling African nations blank holes, but you're going to call me racist. So I thought it was interesting that he didn't defend himself saying I was talking to a white crowd. I suppose that wouldn't make the situation any better, but I'm sorry I did cut you off there.
Right. Maybe he had no idea the makeup of the crowd he was talking to. Sometimes the lights are on you when you're on stage and you actually can't see the audience at all. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that if you are someone like Gavin Newsom, you are a white liberal elite. You described him accurately as a born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He is a member. He was a governor of California. He is liberal, elite, white. But to have influence and importance and power in progressive circles having not entire control over the Democratic Party, but a lot of influence, you need to be some kind of oppressed person. It helps to belong to a marginalized identity group. The victimhood identity has been elevated to the most important cultural cachet in progressive politics. If you're someone who looks like Gavin Newsom, who has Gavin Newsom's background, well, you don't have that. So what do? So then you could talk about your psychological health. Now, probably if you're running for president, you don't want to suggest that you're psychologically unhealthy. So you go to some kind of some physical disability or handicap. He says he's dyslexic, which for all I know, he might be. Although I have to recall, President Biden exaggerating, as far as I can tell, how badly he'd been affected by a stutter to explain why he was not coherent at answering questions from the media. No, it's not the stutter. It's that he's too old to be president at this point. So we are now used to this being a cover for a more serious issue, but it's telling that he wants to say he's part of an oppressed group. And that's why you should vote for him, because that's what they all end up doing.
That's so interesting to me, because you would think, like, if you wanted to empathize with people that didn't come from the silver spoon in the mouth, I think it's such an incredible way for progressives to say that, okay, I can't have had everything go my way since I was born because I'm dyslexic or because I have a stutter. When I think the majority of American voters would rather hear someone, and Trump gets into this, right? Trump, obviously born with a whole lot of privilege, born from an incredibly privileged background, but he was someone that in 2016 and 2024 was able to empathize with regular voters because he could just run on cost of living stinks, jobs are going away, the economy's in shambles, which people empathize with, but they don't empathize with the idea that because you're dyslexic, you see the world like me, when it's seeing the world on these like social classes rather than economic, which is where I think the classes are.
Absolutely. You just have to be authentic to who you are. So to your point, Trump who is beloved by working class people, they identify with him culturally and socially, but he doesn't pretend that he didn't grow up wealthy and influential. He brags. He talks very proudly about how he took a fortune and translated it into an even bigger fortune. Then you have someone like his vice president, J.D. Vance, who is someone who comes from an absolutely deplorable working class, impoverished background, who triumphed over that and made something for himself and wrote about that experience in Hillbilly Elegy, which was a very influential book. You just have to be who you are. Gavin Newsom just needs to honestly say, yeah, look, I am the guy I look like, but I nevertheless care about the unfortunate, and here are the policies that I support to help underprivileged people or working class people or struggling people or whatever he's running on. But because Democrats specifically think they need the identity hook to appeal to people, because that's what works in the Democratic enclaves. It doesn't matter for the general election. It doesn't matter for most Americans, for the persuadable independent voters that they want to bring into the coalition that they need to win. Those people don't care about identity, as far as I can tell at all. But if you're going to be a speaker on a college campus, you got to have some identity thing going for you.